Welcome again for all of you who are joining us for our last career development workshop. This is our fourth session. We've had 3 sessions so far. Alhamdulillah, had a great turnout and very engaging sessions and great questions. My name is Ala again, if anybody is joining us for the first time. And I am the Human and Professional Development for SANC, the Sudanese Association of Northern California here in the Bay Area. This session is actually a little bit different. We have more speakers. We have wonderful experience speakers from the Sudanese community who are joining us for the first time to talk about their experiences and talk a little bit about interview strategies and tips. So we're going to hear from one speaker, and then we're going to go into a break, and then we'll hear from 2 more speakers, and we'll get into the Q&A and wrap it up. Before we get into the final session today, as a reminder, again, I want to remind everybody, especially those of you who are local, that inshallah we're going to have our in-person career fair at the DAD in Hayward, California. It's going to be on October 5th, this next month, inshallah. And we'll send out the flyer with the timings and kind of the breakdown of how things are going to go that day. But generally speaking, we'll have network sessions. We're going to have a panelist of speakers from different backgrounds. We're going to talk to us about their journey and how they got to where they're at in the different industries. We're working on creating a job list or a job board for people from these industries that can, get some referrals and applications. We're going to try to cover as many industries as we can. And then we are also, inshallah, offering complimentary LinkedIn headshots. So if anybody needs to spruce up their LinkedIn account or profile and get like a really nice headshot, come on over and we're gonna offer them for free. And it's, just a service to get back to the community. So we're super excited about the career fair. Make sure you let your friends know, your family, mark your calendar October 5th, and we'll send more details, inshallah. I will introduce our first guest. Actually, she's going to introduce herself. But Manar Harran is joining us today. She's a technical recruiter, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her background and some interview strategies. Thank you, Manar, for joining, and welcome.
Hi, salam alaikum, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm definitely looking forward to sharing some interview tips and insight about how to best prepare yourself for interviews that are coming up. Thank you, Arif and Ala, for putting together this amazing career fair series or career series. It's making a huge impact in the community, so shout out to you all. A brief overview of my time here with you all. I will start off with a nice introduction of myself, my professional background. I'll talk about the hiring process from beginning to end from a recruiter's perspective. We'll talk about different interview stages, interview tips, and lastly, some tidbits on recruiter insights, something that you might not be able to find when researching how to prepare for an interview. So I'll share some of my knowledge there. So nice introduction of myself. Salam alaikum. My name is Manar Harran. I'm from Sacramento, California, born and raised. I've lived in the Bay Area for the past 5 years, which I've had the opportunity to meet some of our Bay Sudani folks. My professional background is in technical recruiting. I've worked at Meta, where I supported senior level talent, and then at Netflix with entry level talent, supporting internship and new grad programs. My educational background is in business. I studied business management and economics at the University of California, Merced. And then wanted to also share that I am a proud member of Shabal, which is a Sudanese dance group here in the Bay Area, really dedicated to the expression and appreciation of Sudanese dance. And also was a former member of the SANC board. I think in 2022, 2021, في الفترة دي I was working as the Human Development Office. I just wanted to say that I'm very impressed with the growth of SANC since then. So shout out to the board this year. Y'all have been doing a lot of amazing work. Awesome. So before we dive into the hiring process, I wanted to check in with folks in the room. Please use the chat feature. And I wanted to ask you guys, when you think about interviews in general, what are some feelings that come to mind? You guys can use one word or a phrase if you would like, and just put it in the chat. Like, how do you guys feel about interviews in general? I know for myself, sometimes I feel a little bit anxious. Uncomfortable is a good one. Um, Sometimes I feel like I'm studying so hard, but unsure if I'm studying the right material. And so sometimes getting proper guidance from a recruiter is really helpful, but I know a lot of the feelings here are around nerves just in general and preparing. So feel free to use the chat feature, language barrier. That's a good one, especially if Arabic is your first language and English is a second language. Sometimes it's difficult to express yourself in the way that you know how بالعربي to somebody who doesn't necessarily speak Arabic. We see more chats coming in. You feel stressed. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I wish more interviewers would share questions ahead of time. Scary. Yeah, these are all really good ones. But I see uncomfortable twice. So uncomfortable is definitely a feeling that folks get when it comes to interviews. So I'm hoping that this presentation can help alleviate some of those feelings. And so please take notes, gather some of your thoughts. Don't accept everything for what it is that I'm sharing with you. Question it. Like if you have a question and something isn't clear to you, then jot some notes and then we'll have a Q&A at the end with other speakers that are on the call. Awesome. So diving into the hiring process from beginning to end from a hiring perspective, the step one is really identifying the hiring need or pain point that the team is experiencing. Typically, a department will identify a need due to maybe rapid growth in a department, or maybe somebody resigned, or there's a restructure. There's something happening that creates the need for a new role on the team. After that, the recruiting team will get together, draft a comprehensive job description. We'll post it on different platforms. We'll also enter it into our applicant tracking system. That way, as we are sourcing candidates, we're working side to side with our ATS to identify who the top candidates are. Once we do the job posting and we're gathering different applications, we go into our application review period, and initial ATS screening. I believe in previous sessions, we've talked about the ATS and what that is. And if those of you couldn't attend those sessions, just at a high level, an ATS is really a tool or software that a lot of companies are starting to use more frequently to really manage and streamline the recruiting process. It goes through this tool before it comes to the human eye. And recruiters really lean on the ATS to help identify top talent for the role. Sometimes there's thousands and thousands and thousands of applicants, and it takes a really long time to filter through those resumes and applications. So we use the ATS to kind of support us there. A really neat tool of the ATS is that it, one, goes hand in hand with the job description. So there's nothing that's in the ATS that you don't have access to as a candidate. All the keywords and different tools and roles are already on the job description. So it is in your best interest to ensure that your resume is in alignment with the job description. That way it can come to the top of our computers when we're sourcing through the ATS. The ATS has a neat feature where they actually score candidate resumes. So let's say there's 10,000 applicants that come through, and they're doing the top 10% candidates, and they score them based off who has the most keywords listed on the resume, and those are the first candidates who get reviewed. So it is in your best interest to revamp the resume based off what's on the job description. After that is the initial phone screen. That is an introductory call with the recruiter just to make sure that the job expectations and requirements are fully understood by you as a candidate and that there is mutual alignment there. Typically, it's a very brief call, 15 to 20 minutes, if even that, to discuss your interest for the role. And then lastly, interviews. Interviews are typically segmented into two different buckets. Behavioral, most folks will have a behavioral interview. And then for specialized roles, there is a technical interview. Typically, the behavioral interview questions are asking you to tell me about a time where you demonstrated X, Y, and Z, or where you struggled with X, Y, and Z. And so for these questions, they might be assessing things around problem solving, decision making, teamwork, communication, leadership. The list goes on. Um, but for you to determine which questions to really prepare for, utilize and leverage the job description. So typically on the top requirements, they'll ask for somebody who is adaptable or can problem solve and things like that. And so use those keywords to guide you as you prepare for certain behavioral interview questions. And then for the technical skills, these are for the specialized roles. My biggest tip for technical interviews is to simply understand what they're assessing. What is the interview structure? There's different assessments and sometimes coding interviews that come up for these roles. And without knowing exactly what you're being evaluated on, it's difficult to prepare. So for the coding interviews, for example, focusing on problem solving and algorithm thinking is going to be important. And then things like system design or product sense, there's different ways to prepare for those technical type interviews. So I'm gonna go ahead and break down how you can best prepare for the interview and where a lot of your time should be spent as you are preparing for the interview. So broke it down into 3 digestible steps. The first one is before the interview, second is during the interview, and lastly, after the interview. So the most important step, in my opinion, of preparing for the interview is the research. You really need to, once, let's say you get an email coming in saying, hey, Manar, we're really interested in your experience and we'd love to consider you for this role. You submit your availability and now you are awaiting an interview. At this stage, the first thing you want to do is research. Research the company's mission, company's values, company culture, the history of the company, how they're doing in the stock market. Did they experience layoffs recently? And just being fully aware of like where the company stands in the market and how you can potentially fit into their needs as a company. In addition to that, in addition to just researching the company, also studying the job description as if it is your manual. This is really your one-stop shop. It has everything that you need in order to prepare for the interview. And that's how we as recruiters draft our interview questions. That's how we prepare ourselves for the interview too, is based off the job description that we created. The next step in preparation is questions, preparing common questions. You know that when you're stepping into an interview, you are going to be evaluated on different components, and it's best to have an idea of how you're going to respond to certain questions before coming into the interview. That way you can come off as a very confident candidate who has done the research, knows what they want to articulate, and nails it in that component. Very common questions that you will get in every single interview is, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? They'll also ask questions like, why are you interested in working for us? And then a behavioral interview question will likely also be asked. And then it's also really important at this stage to not only prepare your responses, but also prepare your own questions that you want to ask the interviewer as well. I want you all to think of an interview as not the company interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them to assess whether or not this is a good fit for you. And it is a conversation. I sometimes forget that an interview is just simply a conversation between 2 people and nobody has the upper hand over anyone, and to think of it as a conversation that way, you know, the nerves can come down a little bit. And then the last step before the interview is just overall logistics and presentation, picking an appropriate outfit for the interview, planning to arrive early or log in early if it's a virtual interview, and setting up your Wi-Fi and all that good stuff to make sure that there isn't any connection issues. During the interview, first impressions are everything. First impressions are the lasting impressions for a recruiter. So greeting the interviewer with a firm handshake or a confident virtual introduction will be a very lasting mark on the recruiter's mind. And really maintaining, you know, good posture, good body language all throughout will show will show how interested you are and how, how determined you are to come off in a positive way in the interview. The next part is while answering your questions. Sometimes it feels like when you're in an interview, they are asking you a ton of questions and you're racing to answer them to the best of your ability. But I want you guys to always stay calm and take a moment to think before answering a question. If a question is being asked to you and you're not sure, how to answer it or what experience you have that can speak to this question, tell them like, hey, can I have a moment? Can I have just a second to think about that? Recruiters will respect that much more than rushing into an actual response that doesn't align with what the recruiter wants and also probably doesn't represent how you think in the best manner. So take your time and also be honest about what you know and how you would approach an unknown problem. If there's a question that's being asked that completely does not apply to you, don't force an answer because a recruiter can sense that an answer isn't maybe authentic to your experience. And if you want to showcase your experience in a different way, then feel free to add a tidbit at the end instead of feeling the need to answer all questions that are being asked to you. And the last element is engagement. It's really, really important to actively listen and engage with the interviewer. Sometimes when you're in an interview, you're always thinking about like, what am I going to say next, instead of sitting there and thinking about what information this interviewer is trying to relay to you. Sometimes the interviewer might be trying to guide you in the interview of how to best answer a question. They'll ask you a question, let's say you don't answer the question for how they want you to answer it, and now they're probing you to different directions on how they want you to answer it. And because we're so like tunnel vision and trying to focus on the best response that we want to give, we sometimes forget that the interviewer is trying to guide us and to lean onto that. And then the final step in really preparing for the interview is after the interview. Adif, if you can go to the next slide, please. The first thing that I recommend you do is really reflecting on that interview experience, asking yourself, did I show up in the best way? And if not, if there's certain gaps that I feel like I didn't get to answer in the interview, following up with that additional information to the recruiter or asking the recruiter, hey, is there anything that I missed out on that you would like, clarity on, or do you need additional information from me? What can I do in this downtime as you evaluate my interview to show up a little bit better? The next piece of advice that I have is connecting on LinkedIn with the recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever you interviewed with. This will make sure that you are visible to them. And also, let's say, for example, that role didn't necessarily work out. You are still connected with somebody in the industry who supports similar like roles that you are interested in. So let's say that role at that company didn't work out, but that person is probably connected with a ton of people in that same space. And maybe they are posting and bringing visibility to additional roles that you may be interested in. And then the last step after the interview is following up. That's the most important thing. Your follow-up emails do get to the recruiter and to your interviewer, and it really leaves that lasting mark, that lasting stamp that re-emphasizes your interest in the role. And sometimes as recruiters, like we'll talk about like, hey, did your candidate follow up? Yes, no. And when it comes to the evaluation portion of the interview, the follow-up email is something that we do talk about and take into consideration as we're evaluating you. We typically recommend that you send the personalized thank you email or follow up within 24 hours of your interview. Cool, thank you. And then lastly, I do want to spend some time talking about recruiter insights and things that maybe typically as a candidate you wouldn't know. So if you didn't listen to the rest of the earlier part of the presentation, this is the part that I really want you to hone in on and take notes on and have some takeaways from. So as a recruiter, we are assessing for competencies and signals and skills that we want you to have. Typically, these competencies, and it's a part of our grading rubric, is already listed on the JD. So it's not something that's blind to the candidate eye. We're evaluating these skills based off the job description. So really focusing on the top 3 requirements of the job description portion will help you align to the competencies that we are assessing for. The next piece that I really want you guys to let it sit in with you is that your recruiter, believe it or not, is here to support you. Our goals as recruiters is to meet the business need, also fill the role, but the candidate is also a reflection of the recruiter is a reflection of the candidate. So when we bring you to an interview and now we're discussing you with our teams and our managers, we are here to represent you. And so don't be afraid to ask for additional guidance or support from your recruiter beyond whatever, automated email that they may have sent you. Follow up with the email, ask them, hey, can I get some support with this? Or I have questions around this. Can you send me a guide? Is there something that I can study from your end that you're aware of that I can prepare for? And so don't feel like your recruiter is far removed from that. It is simply their job to help support you through that. And it's their job to make you feel confident and comfortable and excited really to come into the interview space. That also goes hand in hand with the next bullet point, asking for help. A really good recruiter, in my opinion, will offer an interview prep call, a coaching call, or simply insights on company culture. But if that's not being offered, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, are there any interview prep documents that you can share with me? Or if you would like a prep call, an interview prep call, asking for, hey, do you have 15 minutes before my interview to discuss components of the interview or how I can best prepare myself? That will go a long way. The worst thing that can possibly happen is them maybe not having the capacity to hop on a call, but the least they can do is send you additional resources beyond your interview confirmation. The next element here is really selling yourself with confidence. Whether you have 6 years of experience, 15 years of experience, 3 months of experience, that is your expertise. You are a professional in whatever work or industry that you're doing, and showing up to the interview like, this is what I do. Like, I've been in the space for the past 6 months. I love doing X, Y, and Z, and selling it with confidence. Your recruiter doesn't know you. They don't know your experience, but the way you sell yourself is what lands with them a long way, or in a good way. And it's not really what you've done that makes the difference, but how you effectively share your value, present your value, and have confidence in the value that you have to add. And lastly, be prepared for dialogue. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, interviews are a two-way street. So come with that mindset instead of like, hey, they're here to evaluate and analyze my responses. You're also there to evaluate and analyze how they show up and how they best represent themselves and the company. So when you think about it as a conversation, some of those nerves will go away. So you're not anxious anymore. You're not nervous. You're not uncomfortable. You don't feel lost. You think about it as a conversation with a regular person because that's what they are. But yeah, overall, that is my recruiter insights and notes on interview strategies that I wanted to share. I hope you all found value in some of the topics and things that I touched on in this presentation. I will go ahead and pass it back to Ala and Arif and look forward to hearing some of your questions later on.
Thank you, Manar. That was wonderful, and especially the tips on like who recruiters are and like that you can actually ask for help. I didn't know. I thought they're kind of like part of the interviewers, and you have to kind of show that confidence with them too. But it's good to know that they're your allies and they're here to actually support you to get your job. So that's that was a great information I didn't know. Thank you for sharing your information with us. That was really very valuable. We're gonna go ahead and take a 5-minute break out, if is that correct? 5, yeah. So we'll be back at 12:35. So if you want to stretch, grab a cup of water, or coffee or tea, and join us back at 12:35, and we'll continue with the other 2 speakers, inshallah. And then we'll definitely get. I know there are some questions in the chat. We'll make sure to answer those words at the end of the presentation. All right, 5-minute break. Thank you, guys.